So I'm gonna talk to you now about Munchausen Munchausen syndrome by proxy. What is that? So here's what it's described in what Munchausen syndrome. Permiso, mami. Munchausen syndrome by proxy, or MS. Excuse me, mommy. I'm doing a video. Munchausen syndrome by proxy, MSBP, means, and how does that affect me and so many other um, uh, adult childs of this day and age that are doing a lot better without being under the care of their caretakers or their female parents, like their mothers, for example, or any female caretaker for that matter, who has this kind of condition like the personality disorders and things like that, which is a type of abuse. So here goes. Munchausen syndrome by proxy facts. Munchausen syndrome, permiso mami. Munchausen syndrome by proxy, or MSBP, is now classified as a somatic symptom and related disorder. It is referred to as a factitious disorder that is imposed by one individual on another, permiso mami, on another, or a factitious disorder by proxy. Munchausen syndrome, Munchausen syndrome by proxy is characterized by feigning or intentionally, entre comillas, producing a physical or emotional symptom in another person in order to place that person in the sick role. This disorder is named after Baron Karl Friedrich von Munchausen, who was known to invent fantastic stories of his adventures, including his riding cannonballs and traveling to the moon. Okay, I'm gonna stop there. I'm just gonna explain to you what Munchausen syndrome by proxy is defined as. It's a type of disorder characterized by it's also known as factitious disorder, that's characterized by intentionally inducing another child or a person under the caretaker of the person who has this disorder to make them sick. But it all started with a man from Germany called Baron Karl Friedrich von Munchausen. And Munchausen syndrome is basically just like inventing, or just not even inventing, but more like, I guess, just believing. I'm just gonna say it the way I said it before. Inventing a type of like illness, or a fantasy like story, or just telltale story that has no basis of reality, and it is described as if it were true, when in fact it's not true at all, which is just completely false. Therefore, to my understanding, to my knowledge, Munchausen syndrome by proxy, again, I must emphasize, is the intentional uh, way that a person with this a disease or a personality disorder induces another person, such as, more likely, in this case, it would be the female or mother figure caretaker, to could be a guardian, or could be the mother herself, to her child. And moving forward, Munchausen syndrome by proxy specifically involves a caretaker describing non-existent symptoms or inducing symptoms in a third person, usually a child they care of. How often Munchausen syndrome by proxy occurs is likely very much underestimated, as evidenced by it often taking years to be discovered, even being completely missed in siblings of the victim that is eventually identified. Males are victims of Munchausen syndrome by proxy as often as females. Women are perpetrators of this disorder the vast majority of the time, theoretically because women remain the primary caretakers of children. Perpetrators of Munchausen syndrome by proxy are vulnerable to also suffering from depression, anxiety, and some personality disorders, which I just mentioned before. And therefore, I'm going to stop there. So, basically, why I'm making a video on Munchausen syndrome by proxy is that I think for a fact, I know for a fact, not that I think, but I know for a fact that my mom must have had it, but never was diagnosed or clinically diagnosed with this type of disorder, because it's just something that you really have to make an effort to just, call it for what it is. And she always used to make me feel like sick when in reality I'm not. And in this modern day, in this modern day and age of like the 21st century, for us millennials, if anyone is ever aware of Eminem, Slim Shady, the man who is the he calls himself the rap god. Well, he had a mother who had this kind of personality disorder or mental disorder, and it's a type of abuse. And in the beginning, I mean, I should have been playing the music of his before I even, started this video. So don't, I mean, maybe if more feedback, I'll make it more interesting the next time around. But like, he, stop it, mommy. He, you know, had a mom just like that. And he would like she would always take him to the hospital because she's always saying that he's sick, and they make her, the hospital staff always make her look out to be the superhero to him and things like that, and the saving grace to his well-being. And he's always like the sickly boy and things like that. And kind of feel the same way too, because my mom did take me to the hospital often, even for the most minor things. If I had like under eye bags, it's like poor nutrition. If it's not poor nutrition, it's like it's a host of things. I mean, I can just, if I could describe one thing that's the highlight of like the Munchausen syndrome by proxy, is that the effects of her abuse was so great that I think it's affected my mental health state. And I started to believe everything that the lies that she's been telling me. And it came to a point where I just had to live in my own fantasy world and stuff. And therefore, I was diagnosed with a very, I call myself Frankenstein, because I don't even want to say the kind of disorder I have. If anyone knows me, they could just like bring it up or something, but I really don't want to make mention of it, because it's just, people just look at me after that I tell them my disorder, and it's like, oh, that's weird. Okay, really? And then they just stop talking to me. So, all right, I'm not that. I'm not that. And I know to what extent the abuse has extended, because even my daughter, was targeted when she was under my mom's guardianship, and it just got really messy with the whole DCF thing. I know that's like really personal stuff too, because a lot has gone involved with this abusive mother. And just the fact that I've gone through some things with the hospital staff, and the fact that because I have this clinically I have this disorder, then it's a big drawback in my life for sure. And no one could ever blame her. She can't be wrong. She can never be blamed. And in the Hispanic culture, that's just unreported and just non-existent. I can also even recall the moment when I tried to record her abusive ways of talking to me. This was like when I was back in high school, and I was living in a different part of town before I moved up north. And my brother was so enraged by the way I was just trying to, I was so like adamant and just so determined to record her activities that he tried to destroy my tape recorder. He just slammed it, or I think he stepped on it or something out of his simple-minded rage. And I'm like, okay, yeah, like the apple don't fall too far from the tree, and like mother and like son, and they just go hand in hand and stuff. And I was in shock the way he reacted to me, because I was only trying to do what's right for me, but I'm just being this spoiled and selfish bitch. I was being that to him, and I really don't understand. I mean, to what extent I'd have to tolerate the level of abuse in that family household and stuff. And I just wanted to make it known that my disorder was the result of what I've gone through with her and stuff. And it's unfortunate. I'm not like Eminem. I'm not Slim Shady. I'm not Marshall Mathers. Three in one, like the same person. But I let the whole disorder consume me, and I couldn't make art to it. I couldn't make like a beautiful art, like I could just draw something, or maybe even, come rise above all this adversity that I face and be famous and be a real success and renowned and all this stuff, and maybe even collaborate with the big man rap god himself. But I don't know. I don't think I'm as an MC. I don't know if I'm that good. But maybe like do backup vocals like Dido, or just the softer female vocals or whatever. If I had the voice, I don't have the voice right now. But it's just something I had a fantasy of, because he is, now that I realize to what extent his abuse took on, like he is my inspiration. At one point I didn't understand why he was so angry at his mom. As a matter of fact, I even felt offended by the way he like expressed himself about her and stuff. And I'm like, geez, I mean, like, why? What's the reason for all of that? And then I realized, I had to put up with a lot of some BS, major BS from my mom too. And it all makes sense. I mean, at least he has the luxury and the freedom to express it, and there's no one trying to like sue him. Okay, I'm wrong. He was sued for saying those wrong things as a defamation lawsuit from his very own mom herself, for just like saying the truth, apparently, because it may sound so vulgar, it may sound so like horrible to say about his mom. But if that's to what extent the abuse can you know I'm gonna sound like an oxymoron right now, but the to a level that all that will extend to. And give me a second, please. Give me a second. Hold on, Junie. I'm doing a video right now. Please. ¿Qué está haciendo ahora? I don't know what you just did on the leapfrog, honey. You're changing the scenery. You just learned something new. Good job. Okay, so, and then I noticed that every time, just looking back, the way my mom would always take my daughter to the hospital, and for some odd reason, my daughter was sick. So now she's like to a different generation, to passing it on to my daughter. Whatever disorder that she fabricates on my daughter, she just passes it on to her, and make her think that it's on her and things like that, and make her even say that she has some type of behavioral issue and things, and that I really need to get her seen by a psychiatrist and to speak to a psychiatrist. She even had me like admit, or tried to force me to admit, that she really needs a psychiatrist, and I said no, because I tell the pediatricians all the time, and they say, don't worry about it, that's just normal behavior, and then that bitch of the Brenda Foley pediatrician, just try to blame me, for making a mountain out of molehill, but in reality, she was not under my care. It was under the care of my mother, but she couldn't care less because I'm the crazy one after all, so maybe she too might have Munchausen syndrome by proxy for all I know, and why in the world can her children not have any children of their own and she'll have like grandchildren? So that's the part that I'm still trying to understand. And anyways, I'm going in tangents. Let me get back on topic. So it was reported that my daughter keep getting sick, but I noticed that it's more often than not that she would get sick under the care of my mother. And bless her soul right now, because my mom is not in the best conditions of her health, which is, and this may sound very messed up too, but it's kind of like a relief. Like I'm releasing her. I'm releasing her. I released her from my life. After all, it's destiny. It's something that's just keeping or just eliminating the pain and the years of abuse I had to endure from this person, from this very woman who calls herself my mother. I've been also questioning as to whether I was adopted or not. Why in the world am I treated like with so much indifference, like I'm an appendage or an extension to the family instead of being integrated like the family and just given the proper accolades like so many of the members of my elder siblings have ever received? Since I'm the youngest, I'm the target and I'm the scapegoat after all. So I don't know. You tell me. It's a meal. Anyways, so I'll leave it to that. I just read to you some things about what my take of Munchausen syndrome by proxy. If anyone else is interested in reading the article, um, that'd be fine. If you want me, I think I should continue reading so you have a broader and just a clearer idea of what I'm talking about. Because even after I said that, even my mom being terminally ill and almost in a vegetative state, that would be a release to me. I will elaborate and expound on that a little bit further. So give me 1 second. I'll continue to read. So it says perpetrators of Munchausen syndrome by proxy are vulnerable to also suffering from depression, anxiety, and some personality disorders. I read that, got that. While there is no specific cause for MSBP, perpetrators tend to have trouble forming a healthy attachment to their children, true. Difficulty managing their anger and frustration, true. As well as having the ability to overcome the more natural tendency for caretakers to protect the children they care for. True. Because one thing I can mention is that, okay, two things I can mention. So, whenever she would visit my house and she sees all my dirty plates and things like that, she would offer to like wash my plates and the dirty dishes and the cups and all that. And from whatever utensil that I used after she washed it, I noticed something very unusual, that I get the taste of soap in my mouth. And I brought it to my attention to my sister. My sister is just very tight-lipped about everything. She's just so reticent, not very expressive in concern or have any level of concern to my concerns. Just without a care to the world, it seems, and just very hush hush, tight lipped about things. So she's always protecting my mom, and so is everybody else. But anyways, I brought it to their attention. Didn't seem It just seems to just fly over them. And then the other thing too is that speaking of which, about like to protect children they care for, well, at the time when I was like staying over at my mom's, because like the Department of Children's Families was called, and they had an open report on me, so I decided to stay over at my mom's house, and that's when my ex-boyfriend called. And with the level of abusive behavior, because been known to be very abusive verbally, and even had been physically abusive to me. And whenever I tried to stand up to myself, my mom would always back him and always say, you gotta treat him right, because he is the father of your daughter and all that. So as a lame excuse. Anyways, it's just the type of things I had to put up with, and I had to tolerate, is like nothing that no one should ever tolerate. And he even admit that the other relationships, mommy, the other relationships he's been involved in weren't so tolerant of him like the female relationships he's had in the past. He had their parents not liking him at all, and for a good reason, because he's a scumbag, to be honest with you. He's no good. I tried to like negotiate, talk to him, reason with him, talk to him as his girlfriend, treat him as a couple, or integrate him in the family unit and stuff, and he just wouldn't have it. He just wanted to do his own thing. And because my mom keep backing him and defending him, I now realize that it's not because she's looking for his best interest. It's just another way that she lacks her own ability to show compassion and true and a level of understanding of the situation. Like, she can't see it because she sees me as an object to like fix for some reason, because I can't get my shit together. So you be the judge. I don't know. Okay. Anyways, perpetrators are also more likely to have a history of either losing a parent or being abused or neglected as a child, which is true in her case. Long story short, but maybe for another video post someday. While the symptoms of victim of Munchausen syndrome by proxy presence with are highly variable, they may consist of symptoms that are more easily faked or induced, like suffocation, seizure, bleeding or nausea, vomiting or diarrhea that can be the result of poisoning. And I've mentioned that I've noticed the utensils I used after she washed them had the aftertaste of like the bitter aftertaste of soap, dishwashing soap, from what she was washing the utensils with. She didn't wash them properly, and she always does that. It's not because I don't think it's in any way, shape, or form, or in any level a type of coincidence. I know for a fact that she was trying to poison me and my daughter, and for the fact that my daughter just kept getting sick, and I don't understand why the reason she's doing all this to me and has done so much harm to me and passing it on to my very daughter. Like, I don't get that. Like, I always like spoke up to her and more like stood up to her, and she just won't have it. She would call the police, and ironically enough, every time she called the police, it's always Christmas Eve. And just after Christmas Eve, starting with her birthday, there's some unbelievable. Now that I look back on it, it's like every time I get hospitalized to the psych ward, to the mental hospital, it's always before Christmas Eve, right before or after Christmas. And her birthday is in January. Get this, January 1st, on New Year's Day. And I always end up being hospitalized for some odd and very unusual reason. When there's a crisis, when she just doesn't want to hear, when she wants to get her own way and just come up with her own scheme of things, then things just happen the way they do. And that's Munchausen syndrome by proxy. It's literally non-existent to this cultural group. I'm a Dominican American, and my family